Okay, now our next guest is uh, Professor Herbert Richardson, the founder of Edwin Mellen Press. We're so honored and lucky to have Professor Richardson and with Mellen Press here. Now we will have our welcome from Dr. Dr. Herbert Richardson. I'm sure most of you heard of and know about Professor Richardson, but there's something I really want to highlight very briefly. Dr. Richardson, as a professor, he not only excelled on the faculties of Harvard, Toronto, Tübingen, and elsewhere, but become the target of the single most famous academic mobbing in Canadian history. And that as the founder and editor of the Edwin Mellen Press, he has published more books on mobbing than any other English language publisher in the world. Wow. And played a major role in the development of this field. Wow.
Well, I just wanted to exhibit to you, a man in a condition of, late decrepitude, right? And then just dying on the spot, Joe beat me. But anyway, so but I do want to tell you also, I just like the idea of keeping it personal, and Mrs. Lewis is the mother of a young man who brought me a manuscript describing how he had been mobbed. And the boy, pardon me, he's like 30 years old. The distance from 93 to 30 is long. But the boy was bipolar. And the mobbing got so into him that he ended up engaging in unusual behaviors that led the police to kill him. Right, right. Death by cop as the method of suicide. It's heartbreaking. Anyway, his mother, Mrs. Lewis, put together his notebooks, and I'm bringing them out. I'm publishing them. But I want her here, comforting her. She's helping me out. Right? So I presume if you hear me, I'll talk on a bit more and just cuddle you as a teddy bear. But actually, while I'm sitting here thinking about Mellen has published all these books. Yeah. I started a publishing company 70 years ago and so on. But I will tell you what I learned when I was in the course of my publishing books. People would come to me with their various life stories. And one of the things I discovered was, because when people would send me a manuscript they want me to publish, I would look at this manuscript and I would also have their CV. And from time to time, not very often, but from time to time, I would get some absolutely brilliant manuscript. And I'd look at the CV and I couldn't understand why this person didn't have a PhD, why they didn't have the professional training that would teach them how to write the damn thing that they've written. Baffling. And then when I would ask them questions, what I would discover was that for reasons of absolute injustice, the damn university systems were not only mobbing people, but they were using the bureaucratic procedures to prevent these people from getting the degrees that they surely earned, because I held in my hands the evidence of something that could be a PhD dissertation. Fuck, I taught at Harvard. It would get through Harvard easily. What was going on? So I decided, actually, one night I had just had a story from some guy. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. He'd gotten caught in a bureaucratic injustice, let's put it this way, you know. And the particular story happened to be that he had he'd started his dissertation on Shakespeare. He was an epileptic. In the course of writing his dissertation at Indiana, his seizures had become so bad he had to withdraw from the program. The kid lived with his mother in Upper Michigan in a small town where, actually, how I love American small towns, and hate them too, of course, but love them because everybody knew the story. And so the local school board would give the guy jobs as a substitute teacher, and everybody would know that when he had a seizure, he's having a seizure. Don't be upset about this, and so they could cope. And this guy had spent then 15 more years working on his dissertation that he was trying to finish. And that's what he'd sent me, his dissertation, a remarkable dissertation. And I said, well, what happened? I mean, didn't you submit it at Indiana? Oh, yes, I did. I submitted it at the University of Indiana, but they had a rule that you can't submit a dissertation later than 8 years after you enroll, right? So this guy couldn't get the PhD that he deserved. And I'm telling my class about this, and I said, God damn it, I wish I could start a university and correct this situation. And one of my students said, oh, well, why don't you start one? They need a university in the Turks and Caicos, that's a British Crown colony. And believe it or not, I did. I got in touch with them, and Queen Elizabeth gave me a charter to start a university. So I gave a PhD. And since then, oh, by the way, did you know there was a Mellen University, Ken?
Yes.
Ken knows it. Most people doesn't know it. Sama here knows it. He's another one of these distress cases. So I've given about, I think it's in the neighborhood of a couple of hundred PhDs.
Wow.
And oddly enough, nobody's ever had any big fight with me other than when one of the people who got a PhD from Mellen University was looking for a job with FedEx. The interviewer asked whether Mellen University was accredited, and he said, what do you mean? He said, well, do they have a football team? We don't have a football team, but we have all these marvelous PhDs. Around half of them are teaching in American universities. So in a way, I just thought, well, what in a sense I've created with Mellen University is something like a university that will check whether universities are being fair and just in the awarding of their degrees. If there's a complaint, you take the complaint to this higher board. Right. That's what's going on. By the way, if any of you happen to want a PhD, it's all right. You have to write something so damn good. That's no question. Anyway, so I suppose I published 20 or so books directly in mobbing. It's not been something I've specialized in trying to do because of my relation with Ken, who told me when I lived through a much publicized case where I was dismissed from the University of Toronto And I had all the 14, what was it, 14 or 17 days of trial. And I had all the documents. And I ran into Ken at a conference about 3 years later, and he said, "Oh, you must be that Herb Richardson." And so he told me then and explained to me that I'd been mobbed. I mean, I didn't think I'd been mobbed. I thought I'd been dealing with a bunch of sons of bitches trying to ruin my life. And I didn't even imagine that one could find a structure to what was going on. And so over the years, I've been baffled. I get these books on mobbing. And actually, I wrote one 13 years ago, which I decided I was too frightened to publish. It was McMaster, president of McMaster University, decided to put my company out of business, which I think pretty well did, and I had a heart attack. And I was afraid to publish the book. The lawyer, they have, of course, an infinite amount of money. I had none. So I didn't publish it then, but I published it now. And there's a free copy for anybody.
No, thank you.
No, you read it. Like it after you read it. But anyway, thank you so much for letting me talk here.
Wow, I think you just gave us, this is why it had to be recorded here, is because you just gave us the clinical definition of mobbing. And I'm gonna, something about sons of bitches trying to ruin my life. Sons of bitches trying to ruin my life. That's the...
Actually, I do want to say, my thesis is that which I wrote this book 10 years ago. It kind of floated out there. I showed it to Ken. Ken advised me not to publish it. You didn't like it. The thesis, because you see, part of the problem about mobbing is it's so diffuse. It's so diffuse. How does one say what it is? And let me tell you, I would just like to read you this, because this is what I figured out, right? And this is the thesis of this book. In this book, my thesis is that mobbing people is just as much a way of killing them as shooting them with a gun. Therefore, mobbers should be prosecuted in the same way that police hunt down murderers.
Absolutely,
That's my
yes.
thesis. And I think that's where this conference ought to go.
Yeah.
We should see it in that way. Anyway.
I think you get a sense, and I mean, a lot of you know this already, but you get kind of why this is a stressful area to work in, to research in, much less to live, right? But there's a peculiar dissonance of tragedies and joys too. Because I find joy in the people I've met through this. The achievements of high achieving victims that we come to know. And it's very hard to live with both those things at the same time. So I think we're in store for a lot of that, like it or not. I hope perhaps somewhat more in the joyful vein, if I may, that one thing we'd very much like to do, if you will indulge us, is to have a photograph of our contemporaneous attendees.